They came for my land, my water, my peace. One HOA president, drunk on power, tried to claim my private hot spring as community property. She crossed the line, literally. What followed was war. And I don't lose wars, especially not on my own damn property. I bought this land to be left alone. That was the dream. A quiet patch of Colorado pine country, a cozy house I built with my own hands, and a natural hot spring bubbling up from a geothermal pocket right beneath my backyard. After years of engineering corporate wells for big energy companies, I finally wanted something that belonged only to me. My own slice of steam-kissed paradise, a place where the only drama would be deciding whether to add eucalyptus oil to the water or not. So when I first saw the wisps of steam curling out of the rocks, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I reinforced the spring, built a simple wooden deck around the pool, hung a few lanterns. It wasn't luxurious yet, but stepping into that steaming water under a star-soaked sky felt like stepping into another world. My lungs loosened, my bones melted, and for the first time in a long time, I thought, yeah, this is home. Then the HOA moved in next door. The development didn't exist when I bought my land. It sprouted up later, a plastic-smelling cluster of freshly minted townhouses, perfectly beige, arranged like they were scared of any tree daring to grow out of line. And with them came the queen of the association, Karen Bishop, president, self-appointed defender of community values. A woman whose posture said she marched straight out of a seminar titled How to Intimidate Through Polyester Cardigans. I was in the middle of building a small wooden fence when she appeared for the first time, uninvited, unannounced, and already frowning like my existence offended her HOA bylaws. "Excuse me," she snapped, stepping right past my private property sign without even glancing at it. "I'm Karen Bishop, president of the Silver Pine Homeowners Association. And you are?" I wiped the sawdust from my hands and tried not to stare at the clipboard clutched to her chest like a holy relic. "Lucas Sloan. This is my land. And we're not part of your HOA." She stared at me the way someone might look at a raccoon rummaging through their recycling bin. "All properties within view of Silver Pine are considered part of the visual community and must adhere to aesthetic guidelines." I blinked. "That is not a thing." She ignored me, eyes narrowing as she spotted the steam rising from behind the house. "Is that a pool? A public pool?" "No," I said. "It's a private geothermal spring, on private land. See how that works?" Karen leaned closer, voice sharpening. "A natural resource like that should be shared with the community. You can't hoard nature. I paid for this land. I drilled the casing. I maintain everything at my expense. And we'll be discussing that." She scribbled something furiously on her clipboard. "You'll be receiving a notice." With that, she spun around and marched away like she'd just served a royal decree and expected me to bow. I laughed at the absurdity. A hot spring belonged to everyone now? Sure. Next, she'd claim jurisdiction over the sun. The next week, the notice arrived. It wasn't from the county or the state. It was a letter from the HOA demanding I attend a mandatory community meeting to resolve the dispute regarding communal access to the geothermal oasis previously known as your hot spring. Their wording, not mine. I ignored it. 2 days later, I woke up to the sound of chanting. I stepped outside to find roughly 20 strangers gathered at my hot spring wearing yoga pants and flower crowns. They called it a healing ritual. They said Karen had given permission. They splashed around like it was a reality TV spa day. Someone dropped a glass bottle into the water and one guy tried to sell herbal tea samples. I called the sheriff. When the deputy arrived, he looked tired, like he'd dealt with HOA madness before. I didn't press charges, but I made my position clear. Any future trespassing gets recorded and prosecuted. Karen showed up just in time to witness everyone being shooed off my property. She stood on the edge of the fence line, staring at me like steam was rising out of my ears, not the ground. "You're making a mistake, Lucas," she said quietly, too calmly. "Nature isn't yours to monopolize. Silver Pine has big plans for that spring." I took a step closer, voice low. "This is not Silver Pine. And if you step foot on my land again without permission, the next person you argue with will be a judge, not me." Karen smiled then, slowly, like she already knew a secret I didn't. "Oh," she said, "I think we'll be seeing a lot of each other soon." She walked away. Steam rose around me, warm and comforting, but suddenly the air felt colder. And I realized something unsettling. Karen wasn't going to take no for an answer. She wanted my spring. And people like her don't stop until they either own something or destroy the person who does. It didn't take long before the signs started appearing, literal ones. A week after the illegal yoga soak-in, I found my mailbox covered in flyers. "Open the spring, hot water for all." Each printed in Comic Sans, each with the Silver Pine HOA logo slapped right on top like they thought it made the demands official. Someone had duct-taped laminated versions to the fence posts along the road. One was zip-tied to my actual front gate. And my personal favorite? Spray paint on my driveway. "Water belongs to the people." Classy. The next night, someone threw used bath salts over my fence. By the third day, I installed motion-detecting cameras. Then came the group spa night. It started just after midnight. I was asleep when I heard laughter. Drunken, unmistakably smug laughter. I looked through the window and there they were. A crowd of maybe 10 people in bathrobes soaking in my spring like it was a damn hotel hot tub. There were lawn chairs, string lights. Someone had dragged in a Bluetooth speaker playing Norah Jones. I wasn't sure if I'd walked into a trespassing case or a retirement party. I stormed outside, camera in hand, shouting. One of them, shirtless, red-faced, actually raised a wine glass to me and said, "Karen said it was fine." "Karen doesn't own this land," I yelled. "Get out." They scattered like rats. Half of them tripped over the rocks trying to grab their flip-flops. I didn't even need the police this time. Just the tone of voice you develop after years of telling corporations where not to drill. The next morning, I found a broken lantern, 2 empty bottles of Chardonnay, and an unflushed composting toilet someone had wheeled in. Someone had actually brought a porta-potty. That was when I called Mel Grayson. Mel was a property attorney with a permanent coffee stain on his tie and the gleam of a man who lived to crush HOA overreach. I showed him the videos, the flyers, the notes Karen had left taped to my windows. He didn't blink. "We'll file for trespassing, property damage, and nuisance. And you're going to document every damn thing from now on like you're building a murder case." That night, I upgraded to thermal security cameras. 3 days later, Karen returned. Not to apologize, not to ask for compromise. She broke in. It was almost 2 in the morning when the alert pinged my phone. Thermal signatures, backyard. I tapped into the live feed. There she was, Karen, wearing a silk robe and slippers, holding a bottle of rosé in one hand, a citronella candle in the other as if she were attending her own séance. Behind her were 2 other women. One looked nervously over her shoulder. The other lit incense. Karen climbed into the spring like she'd done it 100 times. She placed the candle on a rock and raised her arms. "Tonight," she said, "we reclaim the healing waters." I walked outside with my phone already dialing the sheriff. "You've got about 30 seconds to get your entitled ass out of my spring before you're escorted out in zip ties," I said loud and clear so the mic picked it up. Karen actually had the gall to sigh. "Don't be dramatic, Lucas. This is community integration. You'll thank me someday." I didn't respond. The flashing lights from the sheriff's car said enough. They showed up fast. I'd already filed 2 prior reports, so I guess I'd made it onto the priority list. Karen tried to talk her way out of it, waving her rosé like a wand. "This is a misunderstanding. I'm the HOA president." "You're also standing in someone else's spring at 2 in the morning," the deputy said flatly. "In your robe, with no permission. That's trespassing." She protested, of course, rambling about bylaws and spiritual cleansing. But the body cam footage didn't lie, and neither did the thermal recording. They didn't cuff her yet, but they issued her a citation and escorted her home. The other 2 women bolted. One left behind a sandal. The next day, I sent the sheriff's report and all the footage to Mel. We were just getting started, but Karen wasn't done either. That evening, she stood just outside my property line, like a damn horror movie villain, and stared at the spring for over 15 minutes. Just stared. Then, without saying a word, she stapled something to my fence and walked off. It was a handwritten invitation. Silver Pine HOA invites all residents to a communal spa appreciation day. Bring towels. Refreshments provided, starts at noon. It was scheduled for my property. I stood there in disbelief. She was actually organizing an illegal event on land she had no claim to. The worst part? She was getting bolder. By this point, I had surveillance cameras on every corner of my property. Motion sensors, thermal imaging, high-powered spotlights triggered by movement. It looked less like a private home and more like the perimeter of a secret government lab. And yet somehow, every week, Karen found new ways to test my patience and my insurance coverage. The spa appreciation day never happened. Not in the way she planned. I printed her flyer and taped it to the front door of the sheriff's office with a note. Organized trespassing. That got me a personal call from Deputy Morales. They agreed to station a cruiser nearby on the day of the so-called event. It didn't stop the parade. At precisely noon on Saturday, a group of HOA residents in matching white robes marched down the dirt road toward my fence like some kind of cult. Karen led them, of course, clipboard in one hand, Bluetooth speaker in the other, blasting Enya like it was a war anthem. I met them at the gate. "No further," I said. "You are all currently trespassing on my easement." Karen stepped forward. "This is a community bonding event, Lucas. We won't be long." "You won't be at all." She smiled in that tight, rehearsed way she had. "Oh, but we've already made donations." "To who?" I asked. "To Silver Pine, our wellness committee." I blinked. "You're charging people to bathe in water that doesn't belong to you?" She didn't answer, just signaled her little army to spread out. Someone wheeled up a cart of fruit platters. Another unfolded a collapsible massage table. That's when I pressed the button on the new speaker system I'd installed. An alarm blared from hidden speakers around the property. "You are trespassing. Law enforcement has been notified. Vacate the premises immediately." Panic. Screams. At least 3 people dropped their towels and ran barefoot back to their SUVs. Karen stayed behind just long enough to hiss, "You've humiliated me." "Good," I said. "Now stay off my land." That night I had a long meeting with Mel. "We need to go nuclear," he said. "Not just defense. Let's hit back." So we did. We filed 2 lawsuits. One civil suit against Karen personally for repeated trespassing, property damage, harassment, and libel. The second against the Silver Pine HOA itself for negligence, unlawful use of private property, defamation, and unauthorized promotion of events using my land. But that wasn't enough. I wanted to ensure she'd never be able to pull this again. So I got creative. We established a nonprofit LLC, Thermal Balance Foundation. Its purpose? To manage geothermal therapy access for the community, on application and subscription basis only. We registered it legally, filed all the IRS paperwork, and created a beautifully designed membership application process. There were 3 tiers. Tier 1, casual soaking available only by monthly lottery. Tier 2, seasonal access limited to approved members with demonstrated commitment to respecting land boundaries. Tier 3, full access available for a modest donation of $10,000 per year. Pending psychiatric screening. Yes, really, it was an art piece masquerading as a legal fortress. I launched a minimalist website complete with black and white photos of foggy pine trees and quotes from Thoreau. I paid for sponsored ads targeted at HOA zip codes. The applications started rolling in. And then, we baited the trap. We approved. Karen Bishop for Tier 2 membership. Sent her a custom invitation via courier, hand-addressed, sealed in wax. Inside was a letter thanking her for her tireless efforts in promoting geothermal wellness in the community and inviting her to a private orientation at the site. She showed up, alone, no clipboard, no entourage. I watched from inside as she stepped hesitantly past the front gate. No cameras in sight, no sirens, just a flowered pathway leading down to the spring, music playing softly. She walked to the edge of the water, paused and smiled. That's when my lawyer, my notary, and Deputy Morales stepped out from behind a privacy screen. We served her. Official notice of both lawsuits, documented, time-stamped, witnessed. Karen's face turned a shade I'd never seen before, something between scarlet and pure disbelief. "This is entrapment," she stammered. "Nope," said Mel. "This is due process." She didn't scream. Not this time. She left in silence, clutching the folder like it might explode. After that, things escalated fast. Karen called an emergency HOA meeting to defend her actions, but half the board had already seen the video from the spa day fiasco, which had somehow leaked onto Reddit. One neighbor stood up and said, "You had us storming a stranger's backyard like we were in some kind of cult." "My wife divorced me over that," Karen snapped. Called him a coward, accused him of betraying the HOA's vision, and threatened to fine anyone who didn't support her leadership. She'd lost the room. Over the next week, resignations started rolling in. The HOA's vice president, Greg Dalton, publicly stepped down and issued a written statement. "Karen Bishop does not speak for me or the ethical governance of Silver Pine." The local paper picked it up. The headline? "Spa Queen loses her throne." And me? I was just getting started. The courthouse was a squat beige building with all the charm of a DMV and none of the efficiency. But as I walked up the steps that morning, files in one hand, coffee in the other, I felt like I was marching into battle. Not with weapons, though God knows I'd fantasized about catapults, but with facts, footage, and the quiet fury of a man who'd been soaked, slandered, and spiritually assaulted by lavender-scented trespassers for over 2 months. Inside, the courtroom buzzed. Half of Silver Pine had shown up, like it was the social event of the year. Some came out of loyalty to Karen. Others, more than I expected, looked curious. Or amused. A few waved at me like I was a local celebrity. One guy even gave me a thumbs up and mouthed, "Make her pay." Karen entered like royalty late to her own coronation. Flowing gray suit, pearls, hair pulled back so tight you could hear it squeak. Her lawyer followed. Sharp suit, expensive watch, permanent scowl, out of town, probably charged by the breath. She didn't look at me. Mel and I took our seats. He cracked his knuckles once and whispered, "Let's cook." The judge, a soft-spoken man with the vibe of a disappointed uncle, started proceedings. Civil case, unlawful trespass, property damage, harassment, libel. Filed by Lucas Sloan against Karen Bishop and the Silver Pine Homeowners Association. Karen's lawyer objected to combining both suits into one trial. The judge overruled. The tension in the room tightened like a snare drum. We went first. Mel presented the surveillance footage. Night after night, Karen climbing the fence, Karen in a robe, Karen with rosé, Karen giving speeches like she was at a TED Talk for entitled suburban warfare. The room was dead silent during the video where she hissed, "Nature isn't yours to monopolize," as she walked barefoot through my backyard. Then came the flyers, the spa appreciation posters with my address printed on them. The video of the mass trespass, the voice memo one neighbor recorded where Karen said, and I quote, "If Lucas won't share, we'll just keep showing up until he breaks." It was devastating. Her lawyer, to his credit, tried to spin it, claimed she believed the spring was a community resource and that she was acting in the spirit of communal wellness. Tried to argue that I'd invited trouble by posting about the spring online. Mel clapped back like a man born in court. "We are not here to litigate vibes, Your Honor. We are here to address violations of property law." He brought in the registered land surveys, dated permits, geothermal drilling receipts, tax records, all proving the spring was entirely within my deeded land and was not in any way a public utility or common area. Then came the HOA members. Some had defected. Greg Dalton testified under oath that Karen had never received board approval for any of the events, that she'd operated unilaterally and with increasing instability, and that she'd refused to let the board see financial records from the donation boxes. Another woman, a single mother, spoke shakily about how Karen had fined her for non-compliance after she refused to attend the midnight soaks. Her voice cracked when she said, "She told me I wasn't community-minded enough to live in Silver Pine." Karen stared ahead like none of it touched her. Then it was her turn to testify. What followed was less testimony and more a deranged TED Talk. She rambled about historical communal bathhouses in ancient Rome. She invoked spiritual inheritance. She cried. She shouted. She claimed I had installed the hot spring with the sole purpose of taunting the community. "Do you think the earth belongs to you, Mr. Sloan?" she spat from the witness stand. "Do you think steam respects property lines?" The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge banged his gavel twice. Mel leaned toward me and whispered, "She's tanking her own case. Just sit back." Karen's meltdown peaked when she accused me of being part of Big Water, claiming I had ties to Nestlé and was bottling geothermal essence for profit. The moment she said geothermal essence, Mel visibly shook with laughter. The judge recessed for the day. The next morning we returned for closing arguments. Karen didn't show. Her lawyer said she had experienced emotional exhaustion due to legal bullying. The judge looked unimpressed. That afternoon the verdict came. Guilty, on all counts. The judgment was loud, final, and satisfying. Karen Bishop was found personally liable for trespassing, defamation, harassment, and property damage. She was ordered to pay me $380,000 Omardon in damages, including legal fees, repairs, business losses from the spa delay, and a substantial award for emotional distress. She received in a 2-year restraining order, a 5-year ban from holding any HOA leadership position, and 100 hours of community service. Ironically, to be served working in public park maintenance. The HOA itself was ordered to pay than $120,000 marbilures in punitive damages and was forced into a full audit with mandatory board re-elections under county supervision. The court adjourned. Mel clapped me on the back. "You just made HOA history," he said, and I believed him. Winning in court felt like stepping out of a war bunker into sunlight. But what surprised me most was how quickly the world around me started changing once the verdict dropped. One day I was that weird guy with the hot spring, and the next, I was the man who brought down Karen Bishop. The morning after the judgment, I woke up to find a line of people outside my gate. Not protesters this time, neighbors, regular folks from Silver Pine, some of whom I'd never spoken to before. They stood there awkwardly, coffees in hand, hands in pockets, like they were waiting for a chance to speak at a funeral. One of them, a guy in a fishing vest named Bill, stepped forward. "We just wanted to say, we're sorry, man." "For what?" "For not stepping in sooner. She told us a lot of lies, made it sound like you were the threat. But watching her unravel like that? Hell, we were embarrassed just to be in the room." Another added, "She made us pay dues to fund those flyers, called it a community wellness initiative. Turns out she used the money to buy a Himalayan salt chandelier." I blinked. That's not even a real thing. It is now. It's hanging in her guest bathroom. They offered to help clean up. One woman brought fresh-baked muffins and said, "You deserve better neighbors." For the first time in weeks, I felt something weirdly close to peace. Meanwhile, Karen vanished. Word was she left town. Her house went on the market almost immediately, listed under a shell LLC to avoid direct association. But even Zillow can't hide shame. The listing sat untouched for weeks. When it finally sold, it was at a 30% loss. HOA elections were held a month later. Greg Dalton, the same man who testified against her, was unanimously elected president. He came to see me personally. "I'd like to start over," he said. "We've cleaned house, rewritten the charter. HOA can't interfere with private properties anymore, even visually adjacent ones." He handed me a formal letter, a full retraction of all HOA claims to my spring, along with a public apology, signed by the new board. They even offered to cover part of the landscaping repairs near the boundary line. But that wasn't the best part. I now had money, real compensation, nearly $500,000 between the lawsuit and interest. And I knew exactly how I wanted to use it. Construction began 2 weeks later. The Aurum Spa, named after the Latin word for gold, was designed to be both beautiful and symbolic. Pinewood decks, thermal channels cut through natural stone, panoramic glass walls overlooking the mountains. It wasn't just a spring anymore. It was a sanctuary. But here's the twist. It was private, fully privatized, gated, members only. And guess who the first contract was with? Silver Pine HOA. I made them a generous offer. Annual access for residents under strict rules on designated days for a reasonable per-person fee. All members required orientation, behavioral screening, and a signed waiver acknowledging that the water was not public property. They took the deal. Greg personally negotiated the contract and said, "It's the least we can do." Watching the same HOA that once called me a land-hoarding villain now cut me a check for community access to my own water? That was something better than justice. It was irony served hot, like the steam now rising from my branded cedar-soaking tubs. But I wasn't finished. Inspired by Karen's spa cult, I created a mock membership package called Hun Karen's Karma Tier. It offered no access whatsoever, just a digital certificate that read, "Congratulations, you've been denied entry to Aurum Spa for community-related misconduct." It sold online for $5. We donated all proceeds to legal aid for property owners fighting HOAs. Within a month, over 12,000 people bought one. One guy even tattooed it on his forearm. I heard Karen saw the certificate trending on Twitter. No one's confirmed it, but rumor has it she tried to file a defamation claim against the internet. Best of luck with that. As for the nonprofit, Thermal Balance Foundation became a real thing. We offered monthly wellness grants, free memberships for veterans and school teachers, and we built a small meditation deck on the far end of the property. Invite only, reservation required. People respected it now, because I'd made sure they had to. A year ago, this land was just my retreat, a place to breathe and disappear. Now it was something else entirely. Aurum Spa had opened its doors with minimal fanfare and maximum curiosity. For weeks, we operated by appointment only, mostly for Silver Pine members and a few hand-picked outsiders. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, especially not the HOA board, who now had to schedule access to the very spring their former president tried to steal. But the rules were the rules, and this time, I was the one writing them. The orientation video became infamous, set to smooth jazz and drone shots of the steam rising at dawn. It included a 10-minute section called Understanding Boundaries, a Case Study, narrated by a velvet-voiced actor reenacting Karen's most infamous quotes over courtroom sketches. People laughed, but they also learned. We posted a laminated copy of the court ruling on the wall in the main lounge. Right next to it, a signed waiver everyone had to read before entering the water. Paragraph 3 stated, "You acknowledge that the water you are about to enjoy was once the target of hostile takeover by an HOA president who confused steam with socialism." No one skipped that line. Every so often a visitor would snicker and ask, "Is she really gone?" I'd just smile and gesture to the small wooden box near the entrance labeled, "In honor of Karen's legacy, leave your entitlement at the door." It wasn't just spa-goers who showed interest. Local journalists came, bloggers, even a documentary crew from a streaming platform working on a limited series called Neighborhood Wars, Suburbia versus Sanity. They interviewed me next to the spring. I wore a simple flannel shirt and sipped herbal tea while explaining the geothermal dynamics behind the natural heat. But what they really wanted was the story. "Do you think you overreacted?" one producer asked. I looked him dead in the eye. "Do you think people should be allowed to break into your house, throw wine in your tub, and tell you your couch is now communal seating?" He laughed. Point taken. The fame brought with it a strange peace. No more midnight intrusions, no more flyers, no more salt-throwing wellness warriors screaming about chakra alignment. Even the HOA behaved. Under Greg's leadership, Silver Pine adopted a new charter, which included the clause, "Private property is sacred unless invited otherwise." Residents told me the board meetings now started with a disclaimer. All decisions must be legal, enforceable, and grounded in actual jurisdiction. A few months in, Greg came to me with a proposal. "Lucas," he said, "we'd like to offer scholarships for low-income residents to access the spa. Just a few spots. You don't have to give them away. We'll cover the cost. It's good optics." I agreed, but on one condition. They had to sit through a 30-minute class titled, "Respecting What's Not Yours, Property Consent and the Karen Doctrine." They signed off immediately. I wasn't trying to be vindictive. I was trying to make damn sure this never happened again, to me or anyone else. And yet, it wasn't all fire and vengeance. We expanded the foundation's work. Veterans received free sessions, teachers too. Once a month, we opened the spa to local therapists for group therapy in the mineral pools. There were smiles, tears, actual healing. The irony? Karen was right about one thing. The spring could bring people together. She just never understood that respect came before access. We even held a fundraiser called Steam for Sanity, where we auctioned spa passes and commemorative robes embroidered with the phrase, "My property, my peace." The robes sold out. Someone started a fan page. At some point, the narrative flipped. I wasn't the crazy guy defending his backyard anymore. I was a local legend, a meme, a cautionary tale with a guest list and great lighting. My favorite part of the spa was the back deck, a quiet overlook with just 2 benches, one wind chime, and a view of the mountains that made you forget why you ever gave a damn about property disputes. One afternoon, I sat there with Mel. He sipped his coffee and said, "You know, we could franchise this." I snorted. "What, open a chain of HOA trauma recovery centers?" "Don't laugh," he said. "That's a real market." We sat in silence a while. Steam curled through the pines. Birds chirped like nothing had ever gone wrong in the world. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since this all began. Relief. 1 year later, we celebrated the first annual MUG, Day of Independent Steam. It wasn't my idea. It came from a woman named Lila, mid-30s graphic designer, recently moved into Silver Pine after hearing rumors about the legendary hot spring incident. She suggested we throw a casual event, something between a community open house and a gentle roast of everything that had gone wrong, and eventually right. I agreed on one condition: I'd get to design the commemorative t-shirts. The front said, "I minded my business and all I got was this awesome spa." The back said, "Private property still a thing." We sold out in 2 hours. Kids ran barefoot through the garden paths. Local musicians played soft acoustic sets under string lights. A poet from town read an ode titled "Steam and Sovereignty," which was either deeply moving or absolute nonsense. I wasn't entirely sure. We had mocktails named the Cease and Desist, the HOA Meltdown, and my personal favorite, Karen's Tears, lavender lemonade with a salted rim. At one point, I noticed a small crowd forming near the exhibit hall, what we'd lovingly named the Tribunal Room. Inside were artifacts from the entire saga: printouts of HOA flyers, surveillance stills of the infamous robe-clad invasion, courtroom sketches of Karen mid-scream, and even the original clipboard she'd once waved like a weapon. Encased in glass, of course. Kids pointed and laughed. Adults chuckled, shook their heads, and whispered stories about how they'd once been too afraid to speak up. Now they spoke freely. They spoke. I wandered outside and found Greg standing near the koi pond, sipping from a biodegradable cup that said, "Respect my boundaries," in bold font. "She really did try to annex your spring," he muttered. "That feels like a fever dream." "She made a PowerPoint about it," I said. "It had transition effects." He snorted. "You know, if she hadn't been so aggressive, none of this would have happened." "True," I nodded. "But then again, we wouldn't have gotten Karen's karma tier." He lifted his cup in a mock toast to weaponized entitlement. May we never see its likes again. The party stretched into twilight. Lanterns glowed. The steam from the pools swirled lazily into the cooling air. Somewhere, someone started playing an off-key rendition of We Didn't Start the Fire, replacing lyrics with HOA jargon. It was terrible. It was perfect. Near the end of the night, a teenager walked up to me, 16, maybe 17, nervous but excited. "Mr. Sloan," he asked, "is it true your hot spring used to be like a war zone?" I raised an eyebrow. "A diplomatic incident, maybe." He grinned. "That's so wild. My mom said you're like a local Batman, but with plumbing." I laughed. "Tell your mom I prefer Iron Man. At least he owns his real estate." He took a photo with me in front of the spring, gave me a thumbs up, ran back to his friends. I looked around, at the laughter, the lights, the way people now treated this place with something approaching reverence, or at least responsible curiosity. I'd won. But more importantly, I hadn't just defended something, I'd built something better in its place. Not a fortress, not a revenge monument. A community with walls, yes, but also a welcome mat, just not for Karens.